Ken Cornell was recently elected chairperson of the Alachua County Commission. He was born and raised in Gainesville, educated in the public school system, and while working full-time, graduated at the top of his class from the University of Florida's Fisher School of Accounting. He has owned and operated a number of small businesses in Alachua County. He was trained as a certified public accountant and is currently a broker associate and senior vice president with Bosshart Realty Services, LLC. Ken has a long record of positive involvement in many Alachua County business and community organizations. He's been married to his wife Angela for over 26 years and has 2 grown children at the University of Central Florida. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Mark. Great to be here.
So, I appreciate you coming on. It was a really amazing budget year for Alachua County, and by the way, congratulations for being elected chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Some have said it's an election. Others have said it's an assignment.
How do you say?
I think it's both. You know, sometimes it's good that I'm chair, and sometimes I am assigned to be the chair, and either I take them both seriously. So very pleased.
We had at least in my time with the county, a pretty extraordinary budget year this year. I've seen a lot of them, and there was something different about this year. You all, first of all, had an exhaustive number of budget meetings. I think it was 15 separate budget meetings. But give us your thoughts on the budget process in general this year.
Sure. Well, I was pleased. For the second year in a row, we had a unanimous adoption of the budget, and I think that's by design. It is the single most important thing that we do as a county commission, really coming up with the budget which reflects the priorities of this community. We started a month early this year, and the reason for that was to involve more of the public's input in a very transparent and I think very beneficial way, because we really got to hear both sides of whatever that particular issue was, argue amongst ourselves, and then there was a lot of compromise. And I think that makes for a good, transparent budget process, and one that I hope to repeat again in the coming year.
You know, the old saying is, if you really want to know an organization's priorities and vision, look at the budget. It certainly rings true in this case. One of the things that came out of the budget process was a small, modest millage decrease. How did you all come up with that?
Well, when it comes to the millage rate, you know, I think we have a general philosophy that we need to get more out of your dollar this year than we got out of it last year. Essentially, we are the stewards of the public's purse, and so one of the things that sends a subtle but important message to the community is that lowering the millage rate, even a modest amount, really drives that philosophy, that every dollar is your dollar, and how we spend it is incredibly important. And if we can do more with every single dollar, even if it's just a little bit every single year, that's an important message, and one that, again, I hope we repeat this year.
One of the certainly largest challenges that the County Commission faces is how to tackle our road issues. It's something that there seems to never be enough money for. And there is a long explanation for why that's the case, starting with the state turning over a couple hundred miles of roads back in the 80s without proper funding to maintain them. But this commission, I know, has taken that challenge very seriously. Tell us what the commission decided to do about road improvements this year.
Yeah, well, again, we made that one of our highest priorities, is actually paving roads in our community that have for too long gone unattended to. As you know, the backlog of roads is higher than the dedicated funding source for roads. And so one of the things that we did was really discuss from the standpoint of what is our policy for road spending. And I think we collectively decided that we needed to spend more money resurfacing roads this year than we spent last year. And I believe we will spend more money next year than we spent this year. But it wasn't just how much money we're spending. One of the things that I think was real important that we accomplished this year is we actually shifted our policy. In listening to the public, many in the outlying areas, and many of our rural roads, we heard the public say, just resurface them. Mm-hmm. Just put down asphalt so that we can move on to the next project. And so through an exhaustive and extensive policy discussion, we actually changed our policy to allow for us to repave roads that are outside of the urban cluster and just do that, just repave them. We, as a result, have put on the calendar for this year 4 major road projects. One of them has already started. County Road 236 up in High Springs is already in the process of being repaved. The next road that I know we've talked a lot about is the repaving of Tower Road. And I have been told that by the time my chairmanship ends that road will be repaved, which I'm very pleased about, knowing that it's been needed to be repaved since probably the last 15 years. We are going to be repaving a very well-traveled road within the city, 43rd Street. And that's a decision that we're making before it gets too bad, because it gets exponentially more and more expensive the longer you wait. And then the 4th project is 62nd and 63rd, which is the road that connects Archer Road to Williston Road. Again, this is a high priority for this county. When we think about economic development and we think about public services and core services, paving roads is something that, while it's not sexy, it's very, very important. And so it's something that we hope to accomplish this year. I've talked to a number of folks, and my hope is as we're driving around Alachua County and your windows are down, that you actually smell new asphalt going down on the road.
I love the smell of asphalt in the morning.
Well, we'll see if that happens. I feel real good about the path that we're now on.
Well, you know, you mentioned 43rd Street, and somebody asked me the other day, why aren't you paving a road that has more issues than 43rd Street? And you bring up a good point. 43rd Street is being done when a road should be done.
That's right.
It will save millions of dollars by doing this before it needs a total reconstruction.
Yeah, and it is a major north-south corridor. Many folks that either work in our county, either come into our county or just are traveling throughout our county, utilize that road. So it needs to be addressed before it gets so bad.
I frequently talk to folks who say the most important thing that the county should do is public safety, that's, in their view, your largest responsibility. And sometimes they're surprised to hear that actually the majority of the county commission's budget goes to public safety, or the largest chunk. So can you tell us the highlights of what you did with public safety this year?
Well, first of all, they're absolutely right. Public safety is an incredibly important and one of our highest priorities, and because it is, you know, over half of our budget is dedicated to public safety, from the sheriff's budget, the Alachua County Fire Rescue Department's budget, the jail budget, and the Combined Communications Center. These are areas that Commissioner Chestnut, I'll never forget, one of my first meetings on the board, he said, when people dial 911, they want somebody to show up, and he's right. And so I was very pleased that in this last year, we not only worked out the difference with the sheriff on her appeal, but we actually came to a compromise and agreed on what her budget would be for the upcoming year. So on the sheriff's side, I think that we will continue to try to work with the sheriff to make sure that her needs of keeping this community safe are met, and that we work with her in the coming year.
Well, and certainly you demonstrated that with I think it was about a $2.5 million increase in her budget that totaled quite a good percentage, like a 3.5% increase.
Yeah, and so the sheriff's budget is over 70 million combined, and a big part of that is the jail as well as law enforcement. And with what's going on in our country and in our society, having dedicated staff of law enforcement that understands and knows our community has never been more important. Moving to the fire side of that, you know, we added 3 rescue units in this last year. We're adding another one in the coming year. And the result of that is that when folks need an ambulance, we are hopeful that it arrives quicker than perhaps it has in the past. That is another one of those where minutes matter. And we heard from our citizens, we heard from some of the outlying areas, and so that is a place that we will continue to invest to make sure that the fire and rescue component of public safety is properly funded for the citizens that it serves. And further commitment for our fire rescue is the 2 new groundbreakings of our 2 stations, Station 9, which is on the northern part of 34th Street and 441, and then Station 23, which is in Waldo.
I know you also were very supportive of the 3-person staffing that the Chief Northcutt has gotten you to commit to, and that's very important.
Yeah, so a couple of years back, a previous commission approved a SAFER grant for 3-person staffing. And what that has done is provide more resources when they are needed for the fire services. In the upcoming year, we received another SAFER grant for the 4th person, and so it just shows that this commission is committed to not only making sure that our citizens are safe, but making sure that the public safety personnel that are serving those citizens are also safe.
Shifting gears out of public safety, I know that economic development is very important to you and to the commission, and you have some tools that allow you to help stimulate that. Can you tell us about the economic development successes and what we have coming up?
Well, first I will say that we as a commission are very committed to economic development. In almost everything that we do as a board, it has an economic development impact. Some of the tools that we use are our contribution and to community redevelopment areas, CRAs throughout the county, as well as a number of times QTIs are brought to us, which are called Qualified Targeted Industries. Those are industries that the state provides 80% funding to create jobs. And I think the QTIs have resulted in, I guess, 373 proposed jobs and capital investment of over $150 million. Now, what that means is that when entities are creating jobs and adding to the tax base, we are able to leverage state dollars to help fund that progress. There's a couple of things also, though, that I want to discuss, and those relate to economic development. University of Florida, as you know, is in the midst of a strategic plan, and the county is very much in favor of, at least from my perspective, the direction that the University of Florida is going with regards to investing in our urban core. Many of the things that we do in accordance with our comprehensive plan are to invest in the urban core. We made some significant investments recently in Depot Park. We provide two-thirds of the funding for many of the CRAs in the city of Gainesville. And so that investment into the urban core drives economic development. It drives a efficient delivery of public services, while at the same time allowing us to invest in protecting our natural infrastructure around the urban core. And both of those are largely responsible for economic development in Alachua County.
I know that beginning with last year's budget that the board has made a pretty deliberate decision to move towards providing a living wage not only to the employees of Alachua County but to folks doing business with Alachua County, their employees. Can you tell us the progress the board is making on that this year?
Again, another area that I think is largely a result of economic development. You know, when you pay your employees that are on the lowest end of the pay scale an extra dollar or an extra 50 cents, largely the majority of that money gets put almost immediately into the local economy. And so one of the things that we are challenged with as a public servant is trying to narrow that income inequality between the haves and the have-nots. And so this board is committed to addressing that, addressing what I call the working poor in our community by making sure that an hour worked gets paid ultimately a living wage. And so 2 years ago, we raised, following the University of Florida's lead, we raised our lowest wage for our lowest paid employee from, I believe it was in the $10 range, up to $12. This last budget season, we continued that progress and moved it up to $12.50. And we also passed an ordinance that said if you decide to do business with Alachua County and utilize public funds, then you too must pay your employees the minimum government wage, which is currently at $12.50. That's good for the individual, that's good for the company, and that's good for our community. And what we have found in the last 2 years is that our turnover has decreased, which results in less training costs for new employees, and that ultimately it's actually saving the taxpayers money because those individuals are not only less reliant on government services, but they are more productive, and it's obviously been good for those individuals. And so it is my hope that this board continues that progress that we've made, and that we continue to lead with regards to this issue throughout the state.
Speaking of our workforce, it's getting older. A lot of baby boomers are retiring. It's challenging to start to fill in, to attract millennials to public service. In addition, we have some areas that are traditionally not as diverse as we would like them to be in terms of racial makeup and other factors. And I know that the board this year has not just philosophically committed to attracting a diverse group of people, but you've also made a budgetary commitment to doing that. Can you share that with our viewers?
Absolutely. So being the father of 2 millennials, it is a demographic that I am not only close to but passionate about. You know, the millennials are actually the largest demographic in the United States. They're just over 80 million, I think 82 million. And they're actually larger than the baby boomers, which are, I think it's 78 million. And so when I think about the millennials, obviously they are the future from the standpoint of leadership and also public safety. Diversity is incredibly important to this board, and we know that your government should be reflective of your community. And so this commitment to making sure that the workforce reflects the community that it ultimately serves, we have asked that the manager include a extensive plan to make our community more diverse, or our workforce more diverse. We've invested training dollars and recruiting dollars into those efforts. And with regards to some of those areas that traditionally perhaps haven't been as diverse, like fire rescue, we are doing innovative things from hiring a diversity recruiter to actually visiting high schools, not just by ourselves, but in conjunction with the Alachua County Sheriff's Office, to show the millennials and others that we value having a diverse, not only public safety workforce, but government workforce that ultimately serves its citizens, is reflective of the diverse community that we have.
Speaking of workforces, to kind of broaden that outside of just Alachua County, people getting to work is very important, and I know that the board's commitment to RTS was increased this year. Tell us about that.
So we've been working very hard with the city of Gainesville to make sure that those that rely on public transportation have it available to them when they need it. So it's not any secret that the majority of RTS services the University of Florida, and it does that very, very well. Many of the folks that need public transportation to get their groceries or get to work came to us in the last year and said, services are not available on the holidays, they're not available on the weekends, I work Wednesday through Sunday. Not having access to public transportation means I can't have a job. And so we heard them, and as a result, we have invested in improving not only the routes, but also the headways. And in the coming year, I am very encouraged by the conversations that we've been having with the city of Gainesville to, in discussion of the gas tax, incorporate additional RTS services for those citizens that ultimately rely on that as their way to get around our county. So again, this board is invested in making sure that that's an important component to our budget, and it'll come up again this coming year.
Shifting gears to another subject that I know is very important to you and to the board, mental illness or mental wellness is maybe a better way to put it, is a very important issue to this county. And I was at the Florida Association of Counties conference with you when they announced that Florida had officially become last in the United States. I think Mississippi was the last state to pass us in terms of per capita funding for mental health issues. So that's, it's not a glorious designation. I know it's important to the county, and I know that every county employee has been involved in mental health first aid training this year. Tell us about the board's commitment to making an impact there.
Well, it hasn't started last year, but last year it was something that we absolutely said that if you are interacting with frontline or really any employee, then let's get trained and understand that. You know, virtually everyone I talk to, either through a family member or a friend or themselves, are impacted by mental illness. And so it's something that we recognize, that unfortunately we are not a leader in the country with regards to mental illness, but that doesn't mean that Alachua County can't lead in its efforts. And so we have devoted a significant amount of general funding, of choices funding, into trying to address this issue locally, and we will continue to do that. It affects areas such as the Grace Marketplace. It affects areas such as many of the diversion courts, teen court, drug court. It affects many of our public safety personnel when you call 911. So it's not a single issue that only addresses one area. It really needs to be addressed across the county. And we are fortunate that this county values doing that when you look at law enforcement, fire rescue, community support services, court services, the jail. This is an area that this community has really begun to take a real leadership role in from around the state, and I believe that it'll continue in the coming year.
One of the most exciting things about your budget this year, I thought, was the funding of the Children's Services Advisory Council. I think the jury is in. We know that children between the ages of birth and 5 years old, that's a major development time for their brain and their functions, and kids who don't do well during that time period are at a disadvantage. So tell us about the funding that was committed and what you see happening here.
So this, because this commission is fiscally responsible, we were able to pay off the Wild Spaces Public Places debt early. And what we had a number of discussions about is that provided an opportunity for this board to do something that perhaps it's needed to do for some time, and that is to really dedicate, really invest in our future. And when you think about investments into our future, there is no greater investment than investing in our children. 90% of a child's brain is developed before they ever get to kindergarten. And so we know that if we can invest at that point in a person's life, in a family's life, that not only is that good for that individual, it's good for that family, it's good for that neighborhood, it's good for that community, and ultimately it's good for the taxpayer, because we are investing in the development of the child's brain at an early age. So this last year, we decided that if this was important, then let's invest in it. And so we have dedicated $1.25 million, $1.25 million into the development of a Children's Services Council. We appointed a board of some of the leading experts, not just in the state of Florida, but from around the world, to sit on that board and or to help serve that board. And so they are in the midst now of coming back to us with a plan.
We're going to do a separate show just on the Children's Council. We're almost out of time.
Okay.
So I wanted to just, you mentioned paying off the bond for Alachua County Forever and Wild Spaces Public Places. We are filming this show on November 21st, so we know that the most recent Wild Spaces Public Places referendum passed. Not only did it pass, but it passed by a 60% vote. So
Overwhelmingly,
that's
yeah.
an overwhelming support of it. It's about parks, recreation, land conservation, and we'll do a separate show on that as well, but just tell me your thoughts on that passing.
Well, again, for me, this is about economic development. You know, when you think about that of this half penny, a large portion of that will be paid for by folks that are visiting our community, utilizing our public services. It just makes a lot of sense. We now will have a local funding source that we can go to our state legislature and our federal lobbyists and say, because we have a local funding source, because this community thinks it's important to invest in parks and recreation, to invest in our natural infrastructure, provide us with matching funding. And so I'm very, very excited about what the public has said to us directly through the ballot referendum. Make this investment, because I think we're going to be able to leverage this investment, ultimately improve our community and create jobs for those that live here.
Well, much, 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 much more to come on Wild Spaces Public Places, and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay.